Hello, and welcome to another episode of Let's Argue About Plants, the podcast for people who love plants.
But not always the same ones. I'm Carol Collins. I'm associate editor at Fine Gardening Magazine.
And I'm Danielle Sherry. I'm the executive editor. Hey, Carol, happy official fall. How you doing?
I am much cooler now that the fall weather is setting in.
Right. We had like a false start to fall, I think, here in New England this year, folks. It was 90 degrees. We actually did hit 90. There were some record-breaking temperatures. It was humid as Florida. And yeah, it made me really, truly appreciate this morning waking up to the first fall weather that we've really had, like a nice cool 60 and dry. This is why we live here. This is why we live here. But with that being said, we've delved into fall a little bit so far this season, but Carol, what's our topic today?
We're going to talk about plant this with that, fall edition. So what, combos of plants that look great together at the end of the season, like now.
Yay! Love it. I love it. I love it. Truth be told, how I got ready for this is I walked around my garden. I'm like, oh, you look good with you. All right, let's take a picture. And I'm going to talk about that one. So I will say, disclosure, these aren't like, the most groundbreaking combinations, but it's what was like truly inspiring me in my garden right now.
Yes, and I must admit that I switched it up a little maybe since the last time you saw the lineup, but I was inspired by one of your combinations, so we'll get to that later in the show. But yes, I also did a walkabout for inspiration. Same thing.
I had a feeling, because if you're watching this on YouTube, which you can watch this podcast as opposed to listen only to this podcast on YouTube, if you go to the Fine Gardening YouTube channel, you can see Carol and I in all of our early morning recording glory. But Carol always has generally a vase behind her in her office where the plants that are in the vase oftentimes are a preview of what Carol is going to talk about. And I spy with my little eye a plant back there that I know I'm going to talk about. So I have a feeling I know how you mixed it up.
That is it. We usually try to avoid talking about the same plants, but I thought this might be fun to, combos that play off a plant with a different take on the same plant.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Well, I won't force your hand to talk about that particular plant, but what is your first combo? Plant this with that, the fall edition.
So this one is a kind of a classic cottage garden combo. What I have is white drift rose, that's Rosa miserland, with tall garden phlox, and that's phlox paniculata. I do not know the cultivar of my phlox.
It's a mystery.
The tag is lost to the sands of time, but tall garden phlox is hardy from zones 4 to 8. The white drift rose zones 4 to 11. So it's a super cold hardy combo. The white drift rose is considered a landscape rose or a ground cover rose. And so it grows like 2 feet tall, 3 feet wide, likes full sun, rich, well-drained soil. It's a rose, but it's pretty trouble-free. It stays disease-free throughout the summer. And unlike some of the other roses that maybe, your grandparents had or your mom had, this one will rebloom throughout the season. So you will get that early summer flush of beautiful little tiny miniature white roses, but it will rebloom throughout the summer. So it's a nice solid base for many combos throughout the season. But as you get toward fall, I have this phlox that's been, at first they started out side by side. Now it's kind of growing up through the rose, and it gets taller than the rose, which only hits about, 3 feet at the most. And so you have these, this cloud of phlox flowers sort of floating above the white roses. And I love it. And it's a little bit froofy for me, but I'm okay with that. And I would say, the phlox that I have, it's very pretty. It's got, sort of a pink petal with a darker pink eye. And what I noticed this year, we had a very hot, humid summer, and especially toward the end, not a speck of mildew on it. And that's not always the case.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's, and then again, the white drift rose also quite disease free. So I think that's an important part of this combination. But when I was traveling this summer, I got to see some awesome phloxes from the Garden Girls series. And those tall phloxes are upright, mildew resistant, reblooming. So you're going to, they bloom maybe even longer into the fall than mine does. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop photos in my combo will be in the show notes, but also I'm going to drop in a picture of phlox with Uptown Girl and Glamour Girl.
Nice.
Uptown Girl is light pink with a darker pink eye. Glamour Girl is coral pink. And it has dark purple stems, just gorgeous. Really, the Garden Girl series are selected for, they're quite different from each other, but they're all, have that disease-free reblooming thing. So straight species of garden phlox is native to the eastern US. Pollinators love it. And I love the smell of phlox in the fall. It reminds me of gathering apples from like abandoned homesteads with my parents because, when I was a kid, we would know where the good apple trees were, and phlox was often nearby. These are the two things that people planted long ago, and they just kept going. So
it's a trigger fragrance for you.
Yeah, it's like nice fall memories go with the smell of phlox for me. So that's just an added bonus.
That's amazing. All right. So the Uptown Girls series of phlox, not necessarily the phlox that you have, but a very close dupe and a good suggestion because of them being so disease resistant. And then say what the drift rose was again.
So it's the sort of the brand name for it, if you will, is white drift rose, and that's what you'll see it sold as. But its botanical name is Rosa Miserland, Meizorland. So, if you look it up, you may be seeing it like that, but I think most people are selling it as white drift.
Carol, this was mind blowing as far as your first combo. Because I think of roses and phlox as both being summer, not fall. B, I always think of them being super problematic plants because of them being, so susceptible to, especially, the humidity diseases, black spot, brown spot, rust, powdery mildew. So the fact that, both of these look good after the humid weather and look so good that they were a dynamic combo enough for you to talk about. I mean, I think both of that, recommendation is so awesome because it's very unexpected. I mean, the second you said rose and phlox, I was like, all right, this is going to be good. Let's see where this goes.
Right. Yeah, it sounded like it was going to be a disease fest, right? But
right, I'm like, wait, what's the great pairing here? Black spot with mildew? Like, what's going on? But okay, that is very cool. I'm gonna have to write down the names of both of those because I think my garden might need those. All right, Carol, so I'm going for it. I think I'm going to talk about the pairing that makes me the happiest right now, and I think that we're going to have one plant in common from this pairing. But I was walking around and I saw my Limelight panicle hydrangea, which is Hydrangea paniculata Limelight, zones 3 to 9, just dancing in unison, like dancing with the stars. And they were like the number one couple. My Sun King Aralia, which is Aralia cordata, Sun King, and that zones 3 to 9. And man, they just look awesome together right now. I mean, end of September, beginning of October, the Limelight panicle hydrangea, which, is a sizable entry into this pairing. It's Mine is probably topping out over 6 feet tall at this point, and it's got humongous panicles on it. These, the size of my head, which, for those who aren't watching the YouTube channel, I guess is about the size of a baseball mitt. It is a huge flower head, and they start out chartreuse when they start blooming in, early to midsummer. But these panicles of flowers have now shifted, and they've got kind of a rosy blush to them. So you've got a hue of chartreuse, a hue of creamy white, and a hue of just this beautiful blush color. And they're kind of, hanging out on the top of the shrub at this point in time. And then my Sun King Aralia, which is planted next to it, has now sized up similarly. It's about 4.5 feet tall. I know that they say everywhere 3 by 3 for a Sun King Aralia. That is crap. That is not accurate. They don't know what they're talking about. My Sun King Aralia is about the same size as me, and I'm 5'3", so it's a big beefer. And they're just kind of growing in unison. And at that point where they're touching each other is beautiful. The Aralia at this point in time has just a really beautiful golden hue to it. It's more yellow because it's gone through the summer and had a lot of sun. So it's more yellow than chartreuse, but it's just a stunning, stunning carpet to these hydrangea blossoms. And the Aralia this time of year is sending out its flowers, which a lot of people go, oh, mine never flowers. Mine flowers all the time. I think it's because it's in a little bit more sun, but long kind of wands of these Sputnik-like little white flowers that are poofy and, kind of like Cimicifuga or Actea, but only the bigger version of them. Just wands, and they're so beautiful. And they're kind of dancing in symmetry with the big beefy blossoms of the hydrangea. And it's just a nice textural combination. But then those blossoms that are kind of nondescript on the Aralia will eventually turn into a black purple berry. And then the hydrangea starts getting even darker pink. So just that whole dance that these two plants do for the next, 3 to 4 weeks is just, every day I love going out there and looking at this combination and just being like awestruck at how much it changes too, color transition wise. So, I feel like everybody knows Limelight. It's the OG of, panicle hydrangea cultivars. I feel like it was one of the first ones of the new crop of panicle hydrangeas. But those panicles 8 inches or more, baseball mitt sized on a sturdy shrub. It keeps them upright. It's got thick stems to the point of where I thought this year, hey, when I cut those back, I'm going to use those as stakes for my other perennials because they're so sturdy. And Sun King Aralia, I know a lot of people struggle with. If you don't know this plant, it's a must-have for partial shade into mostly sun, I'll say. If you're in the South and you have a full sun exposure, you're probably going to want to give this plant a little bit of partial shade. It will burn if it's in too much strong sun for an extended period of time. But here in New England, I got it in a pretty much full sun situation, and it's doing gangbusters now for 8 or 9 years. It glows. It absolutely glows. Even if you put it in partial shade, it still maintains this chartreuse glow to it. And it's a must-have plant. It is, I feel like once established, I think that's the key. You got to be good about watering and get it well established. It is a dynamic plant that does not, it behaves like a shrub, but it is actually a perennial because it will die completely down from that 5-foot height in the winter. First hard freeze, it really knocks it back, cleans up itself. You go and you kind of gather up all the detritus, and that's about all it needs. And it will slowly expand and expand and expand. And Carol, as you know, because you were the beneficiary, I cleave off little chunks of it every year and pass this plant along. It is an awesome pass along plant. And I truly feel like those divisions are oftentimes so much stronger than the poorly rooted plants that you can buy in the nursery. Sorry, garden centers, but I struggled at first with Sun King Aralia. It didn't take as readily and as awesome. It took me a couple of times to really get a beefy plant established, but once it got established, it's off to the races. So yeah, so I would say my favorite combo right now is that Limelight Panicle Hydrangea with the Sun King Aralia. This is not a combination for the week. It is a big combo. These are two big shrubs that just look awesome together at the back of a border on my hillside, seeing them from afar. Oh, perfection.
Can I ask a question about the hydrangea?
Yes.
Does it do anything fall foliage wise? Does it change color, or do the leaves just fall off it?
It does, and I think panicle hydrangeas sometimes get shortchanged when compared to oak leaf hydrangeas, which are stunningly gorgeous in fall. But panicle hydrangeas kind of turn an orangey yellow. The foliage does. The nondescript leaves. The leaves are kind of just this oblong green color most of the year, but in fall it does get some fall foliage color, which again adds just like that little bit of extra to that combo, because it really offsets those beautiful, at that point, almost maroon flowers, because the flowers do turn such a dark pink. But yeah, thanks, Carol. Yeah, I forgot that part. That's another bonus.
Something to look forward to.
Exactly. All right, Carol, lay it on me.
All right. Okay. So I saw your amazing Sun King combo, and I said, I have a Sun King combo. Could I,
Yes,
I'm
yes.
not competitive. I think that it's such a cool plant because it combines beautifully with so many different things. And
Versatility.
Yes, absolutely. It's so versatile. And so my baby Sun King Aralia, which is it is a child of yours, so it's not as big as yours yet. It gets maybe 3 feet tall, maybe at this point in its life. But it is starting to flower as well. So they're genetically identical, I guess, is the reason, right? And in the same conditions, more or less. So I have my Sun King Aralia next to one of my mass plantings of Black Hawk's big blue stem. That's Andropogon gerardii Black Hawks. And then on the other side of it is the Dark Night Blue Mist shrub that I talked about in the late summer color episode, a few weeks back. And so that's Caryopteris, clandonensis Dark Night, and that's zones 5 to 9. So all of these are pretty hardy. Dark Night is sort of the outlier at zones 5 to 9, but both Black Hawks and Sun King, zones 3 to 9. So Northern Gardeners, those two, that's a winning combination right there. And if you can add, if your zone allows it, and you can add in a blue mist shrub, I just love how the colors of these 3 plants play together. What I notice when I'm looking at this combo is that they all have a similar stem color and the similar thickness of their stems. So the Black Hawk's big blue stem, which is the biggest, is the tallest in this group. It gets 4 to 5 feet tall. Has its stems are sort of a beautiful reddish purple. And this selection is, the claim to fame is the foliage and the flowers, which are almost a dark purple by the end of the season. But those reddish stems are almost the same as the Caryopteris and the Sun King, which, normally we just notice the flowers and the foliage mainly in the flowers, but those stems are really cool. And it's just having something that picks up that color. I think that's a neat thing to do. I space my Black Hawk's big blue stem about 2 feet apart, so that they sort of grow together and they form almost like a wall that's sort of to the south of the Sun King, and that casts a little bit of shade. So this combo is in full sun, but having the taller grass next to Sun King, it was part in shade and part in sun, so the leaves almost got this like lemon lime thing going on. And
Nice.
that, the chartreuse and the gold, when the dark night blue mist shrub starts blooming and brings in that deep, deep blue, it's almost like the exact color complement of the gold. It's just, yeah.
Perfection.
Fun, yeah. And it's something that you see from many, many, many yards away. You can see it from across the whole yard. I think next year I may need to move Sun King out. It's kind of getting squeezed between the Caryopteris and the Blackhawks. But this year they played nicely together. Next year, I think, somebody's going to want to take over Sun King's territory, and I can't let that happen.
I mean, he's bulky. He might fight back a little bit, or you might be to the point now where you could even cleave off a portion of Sun King.
That's a good idea. And then if you move it somewhere else, they sort of wink at each other from across the garden. That's
right.
a
You're
great
getting a
idea.
little bit of that cohesiveness going on. Yeah, yeah. And as you know, they divide relatively easily. I am in love with the fact of having a Caryopteris, that dark night, that blue playing off of the chartreuse, or the, kind of the lemon yellow of the Sun King. What an awesome color combo.
It is. And it's just not a combo that you get very often, I think, because that blue color is so rare. But yeah, the two side by side, and then that reddish purple stem as the common thread. Yes, I like it a lot. I put actually 2 angles of this combo in the show notes. I'm not sure if they'll put both in the folder, but yeah, it looks good from every angle, these 3 plants together.
I love it. So yeah, Carol mentioned, I mean, as you all know, we put our plant list with all the plant names of everything that we talk about on the show, as well as photos, if you want to see the photos and you're not watching the video, on finegardening.com. Click on that podcast tab that's up at the top, and that saves you from having to write down or figure out what we're saying. And in my case, my terrible Latin pronunciation, figure out how to spell these things. So go to finegardening.com, click on that podcast tab. So Carol, I love it when we pull through a theme. And so my second and last pairing features a Caryopteris, a blue mist shrub. And I'm a big fan of that shrub. I can't get enough of it. I just think this time of year, it is truly a plant that puts on a show in the last throes of the season. And that's invaluable. And we talked in previous episodes about how it's a really important pollinator plant too, because it does stay into bloom sometimes all the way into fall. And the pollinators don't have much going on other than my asters at this point. So my pairing is Worcester Gold blue mist shrub, which is Caryopteris, clandonensis, Worcester Gold, zones 5 to 9. It's one of the hardier of the Caryopteris. So, if you're some of the Caryopteris you'll see is zone 6. This guy is a beefy zone 5. And it's one of the older cultivars with a beautiful chartreuse, kind of more on the yellow, acid yellow side of chartreuse if you put it in enough sun. Very, very fine little leaves that are all serrated around the edge. Just this very fine, pillowy, gorgeous texture to it. And that I pair with another old-fashioned favorite, which is Goldsturm, Black-Eyed Susan, Rudbeckia, fulgida, sullivantii, Goldsturm. That's zones 3 to 9. You don't get a bigger range really than that. That Black-Eyed Susans, the traditional Goldsturm, it grows everywhere. I mean, it really does. You got to try real hard to kill that plant. And you'd think because of yellow on yellow, that wouldn't really look good. But I think it's all about the timing with these guys. And I'm not big into big floral shows. Usually I'm more into foliage plays nice with each other. But at this time of year, the end of fall, the black-eyed Susans are putting out their last burst of blossoms, which is just really beautiful. Those gorgeous golden daisy flowers with the dark brown eye, just really, really beautiful. About 2.5 feet tall. And those right now are coming up through my Caryopteris Worcester Gold, which is in bloom with blue little puffy firework flowers all over the outside edge. So again, kind of like you were talking about with your Aralia and your Caryopteris, that blue on yellow play is just spectacular. It's really, really beautiful. The Caryopteris stays relatively small. This one only gets to be about 2.5 by 2.5. That's about as big as it is right now in my garden. Earlier in the season, it's a great textural play because the Rudbeckia has these kind of basil rosette, fat, spoon-like leaves to it that are dark green and a little bit hairy and kind of a dense, bold look about them in the garden. And then next to the Caryopteris, which has, kind of a feathery and very, very fine butterfly-like, texture to it in a bright yellow, because when it first emerges in spring and moves through summer, it really is more of an acid yellow than a chartreuse color. And so that texture play and that color play is really beautiful, even when these aren't in bloom. And then basically, Rudbeckia starts blossoming, which is really cool, and it has a long bloom time, usually in early to midsummer. Keeps going, and then the Caryopteris just bursts into bloom, and those little blossoms get to play together. The other thing I like about this combo is together, okay, we're talking full sun, and we're talking lean, well-drained soil. Both of them are very undemanding about soil fertility, soil texture. They really, if you're looking for something to put out by your roadside, we're talking Hell Strip garden here, this is a great combo to put out there because these plants really are tough as nails when it comes to really, really horrific, gravelly, not great soil. So right now, looking great. Both are just, kind of doing their thing. They're still in bloom. The blossoms are going to fade. I understand that. But the next bonus that comes is that they both get pretty significant seed heads. The goldfinches love the Rudbeckia, love that Goldsturm seed head. And then I noticed that the chickadees go bananas over the seed heads of the Caryopteris, which is really kind of cute. And they just, fight over the seeds, and there's a big commotion outside of the window, and I look out and they're kind of rumpusing in that combo. So it's a combo I really like. It's a combo that's tough as nails, and it looks good even when there's not blossoms going on, which is really, the fall show is all about the blossoms.
So I'm taking you do not deadhead because of the chickadees, is that right?
I don't deadhead. And, I know people say that, Caryopteris has a tendency sometimes to reseed. I almost wish it reseeded a little bit more in my garden. I've gotten probably 2 seedlings my whole life from this Worcester Gold in its whole existence, which has been about 10 years or so. One of those seedlings I kept for myself, and one of them I gave to our CEO. And she likes to send me photos of it every year when it's doing its thing in fall. So I think we're about due for a Renee photo of her Caryopteris Worcester Gold. But I don't deadhead. But if you are in probably a more southerly region of the zone, might be a good idea to deadhead this puppy, because reseeding can happen, and you want to stay on top of that. And now, because everything sounds better with a British accent, here's Peter to hijack this episode and turn it into a food podcast.
Fall. There's truly no better time to be in New England, my home of the last 43 years. The leaves have now turned to brilliant shades of red, orange and yellow, and it's becoming harder to navigate the back roads to the grocery store because of all the leaf peepers driving 5 miles an hour. It is a glorious season. If you're not from New England, it might be hard for you to relate to some of autumn's finer pleasures. Apple cider donuts, corn mazes, and the faint smell of chimney smoke that wafts through the air. What are some memorable fall pairings that are not plants? Well, lucky for you, I feel uniquely qualified to speak on such matters. First, we have apple cider paired with the aforementioned apple cider donut. There is scarcely a food store, farm stand, or local orchard gift shop that isn't fully stocked with that sweet fruit nectar this time of year. And generally not too far away, you'll find bags of those circular pillows of love, the cinnamon and sugar cider donuts that I dream of for months before their arrival. I recommend warming up a cup of cider, in an English teacup of course, and then dipping the donuts into the liquid before feasting. That is a pairing made in heaven. The next fall combo that I enjoy is pumpkins and pie. I realise this has now turned into a food podcast. I hope you don't mind. Pumpkins are everywhere this time of year, and my favourites are the small sugar pumpkins. They're good for decorating, yes, but they're also good for cooking. And at least once each autumn, I take on the challenge of making a pumpkin pie from scratch. I admit it isn't always the prettiest specimen, but it's always delicious. My final must-have fall pairing is a woolen scarf and mittens. The chillier weather means it's time for some of my treasured knitwear to make its way out of the closet, and my Luton Town scarf is always top of the list, of course. Nothing feels cosier on a brisk morning walk than being wrapped in wool. You may be surprised I didn't say a woolen hat and mittens. Never. When you have a head of hair like a mature George Clooney, you never cover it up. Happy fall, listeners. And be sure to soak up all this glorious season has to offer. And if you choose to wear a woolly hat while doing so, so be it.
Wait, Peter makes pumpkin pie from scratch? Carol, why have we never had any of Peter's pumpkin pie?
Oh, it's because we work remotely. That's why.
I mean,
if we worked in the office.
That is no excuse. Peter, we're expecting a pumpkin pie in the mail immediately. Oh, all right. So, you know who's not in the mail? Our expert, hopefully, unless they mailed themselves to our remote studio. Carol, who's coming up on expert testimony?
We're going to hear from Susan Morrison. She is in the East Bay area outside of San Francisco. And so her fall looks a little bit different than ours.
Hi, this is Susan Morrison, and I am a landscape designer and a garden writer based in Zone 9B in Northern California. I live in the inland part of the Bay Area, so summers here can get quite hot as we don't get the cooling breezes or the fog from the ocean. And as I know is true in a lot of other parts of the country, drought is very much an ongoing issue here. So I'm always looking for plants that don't need too much water. I had two combos to talk about today, and for both of them, the focus is going to be on foliage color rather than flowers. The first one is a very simple two-plant succulent combo, Aeonium Schwarzkopf and Graptopetalum paraguayense, which is quite a mouthful, so I'm just going to call it by its common name, which is ghost plant. The Aeonium has beautiful, shiny burgundy foliage, and it makes a really nice architectural background plant in a small better container as it gets anywhere from 1 foot to 3 feet tall and about 1 foot wide. In contrast, the ghost plant has very lovely soft gray silver leaves. It's going to get more pink in the sun and be more gray in the shade. And over time, it becomes a mound about 1 foot tall, 2 feet wide, maybe even wider than that. I planted this combo in a narrow bed with the aeoniums in the back and the ghost plant in the front. And I really love it because even though it's very simple, it's also very high contrast. And so it's quite dramatic. It looks virtually the same year round. So it makes a very strong foundation planting in the garden to round out your perennials and your other seasonal plants. There is some seasonal interest though. In spring, the ghost plant gets very like shoots of dainty yellow flowers, but really it's the foliage that's the story here. Now, these particular succulents are happy in sun to part shade, but because summer can get into the 90s where I live, full sun is just a bit too much for them. So in my garden, they're doing great with morning and early afternoon sun and afternoon shade. I water them once a week, but because there are other plants on the drip line, if these were the only plants, then I would probably cut that down to every 2 weeks. Both of these plants propagate very easily from cuttings. You just give them a few days to harden off, and then you stick them in some well-drained soil. So if you're a fan of free plants, these are two you should definitely consider. The second combo is 4 plants, and it's another one that is thriving in my garden in part shade. The first plant is Canna tropicana, which gets 1 to 3 feet wide and 3 to 6 feet tall. The second plant is 3x3 color guard yucca. The third plant is Clarity Blue Dianella, generally speaking, maybe 2 feet tall and wide. And then finally, Echeveria imbricata, a succulent also known as hens and chicks. And it's just going to get a few inches tall, and the individual rosettes are going to vary between 4 and 6 inches. So this whole combo takes its cue from the foliage of the cannas, which is a very dramatic mix of color. The leaves have shades of gold, of orange, and a really nice blue-green. So each of the plants I combine it with play off of those colors. The yucca color guard is probably the most brilliantly colored plant in the combo. It has golden green strappy foliage, and those spiky leaves also make a nice textural contrast to the broader, more tropical style leaves of the canna. And the same is true for the Dianella, which has a narrow spiky leaf to it. And really, these 3 plants don't need anything else to make them a winning combo. But in my garden, I've planted them in a narrow bed that runs along a path. And in a space like that, I really like finishing off the look with a small edging plant in front. And so that's where I have planted the hens and chicks. Like I said, it just kind of finishes out the combo. And it also provides some additional textural contrast and a nice blue color echo. The hens and chicks will bloom in the summer. They get these long spikes of very small coral bell-shaped flowers that are very popular with hummingbirds. And the canna also blooms. It gets very pretty orange flowers in summer, but I would love this plant even if it never flowered. The yucca, the Dianella, and the hens and chicks are all evergreen. So when the cannas get cut back in winter, the combo is less dynamic, but the space still really looks nice year-round. So you can plant this in full sun. But with the exception of the yucca, which I find is happy just about anywhere I plant a yucca, I prefer to plant these particular plants in part shade. In full sun, the canna is going to grow faster, and it's going to get taller, and it's going to flower more, but the leaves will be much more prone to burning, and the color is less vibrant. So I am happy to sacrifice some height and flowering to keep that amazing foliage looking its best.
Carol, a succulent combo for fall? Oh my gosh, California. I love it.
I know it is really nice out there, like pretty much year round. So jealous.
I know, especially in February.
Right?